Hola.
Hola. That's nice that it starts automatically, but I'm going to stop it for now and I'm going to record. Okay, so I could start by just orienting us to how we start the grant process currently. Everything like the idea is it's up for feedback, and kind of walk you through the current um, documents that we refer to when we're looking at grants. And then you could give us feedback from there. But for some people, this may be the first time they're hearing about grants and Colectiva, right? So in the chat, and I can screen share if that would help people. Hola, Elena. Hola, Gloria. Si me escuchan ahora, estoy en el canal de inglés.
Hola,
So,
buenas tardes.
hola. ¿Estás escuchando a Aida?
No, no la escucho.
Ok, so busca el globito y busca el canal de español. So if you hear me now, you are in English. Me dicen que si todo está bien. Okay. So, okay, our grant process starts with this grant screening form where usually me or Stina or Becky Alper in the past, anyone is welcome to fill out this grant screening form. In fact, there's an Emerson parent right now who's talking about an interest in applying for a grant, and we haven't really met him before, but he's interested. Great. So anyone can fill out this grant screening form. The link is in the chat. And you just say the name of the institution, a link to the application, when is it due by, who will write it, who will report, what kind of financial or legal documents are needed from Colectiva, and making sure it's mission aligned. And then what are you going to apply for, right? And what inspired you to apply for this? Is it just an idea that occurred to you one day, or did one of our stakeholders say this is something we should fund, right? So when you fill that out, the responses go to this response sheet. And all of these green ones indicate that they've been approved by our board. And those approvals happen at board meetings, and it's by consensus. And green means that they were approved and we applied for them. It doesn't mean that we got them. So you'll see like these co-op ones, we did not get those, but that's okay. We tried, and mostly when we try, we are successful. This one, Walmart, it was due October 15th. We just missed the date on that one, so we just missed that one. It's okay. Sina sometimes puts things in here, and if she doesn't tell me, I just don't check it all the time. We have one now that we mentioned in our last board meeting. That's a big opportunity. And it's with the City of Minneapolis Public Works. And this is something that Aida has been developing. She's a train the trainer. She has an interpreter cohort, and City of Minneapolis sees that we could provide a service for the city with all our bilingual fleet of people, right? So this tells by when it has to be done, who will complete the reporting, what documents we need, how it's aligned to all four things, and a basic description. Okay. After that, the board decides, are we going to apply or not? And then we have a whole series of our space in our drive, which is called grants. And these are all the grants. Are you seeing my screen as it changes? Yeah. So every one of these folders is a grant that we've been awarded before, or if it's red, it means we applied and we didn't get it. But if it's, well, I need to do some color changing, but generally the green folders mean we got it and we're currently working on it. Okay, so everything here is visible to any of you, especially if you want to support in any way this grant work. Then once we get a grant, we enter all of the things the grant pays for on this spreadsheet. And so this is one grant for Camp Colectiva. These are all the things that we applied for with Camp Colectiva. This is everything that we asked for in the grant. And then as we spend it, our accounting team keeps a running total so that we can make decisions about if we need to borrow. Like grants are pretty flexible about borrowing from certain line items as long as it's within like 10 or 20%. So there can be a little bit of wiggle room between line items, right? But the bottom line is most of them, we spend the money and then they reimburse us. So it's important that we spend it all or else we just won't get everything we applied for. And most of them are for certain projects, right? We have one right now that is kind of the inspiration for this meeting. That is the first grant that we've ever gotten that is for general operations, which means nonprofits usually use it to pay staff or to pay things like hosting events or paying for basic services or like paying for an office. But we don't need to do a special project with this $30,000. And so this is the first time where we've been able to dream and think like, what are our operations if we're an all volunteer crew right now? Clearly, for most of our grants, we dedicate 10% for administrative funds. And we use those administrative funds to pay Aida, like right now, she's earning money for interpreting, and that's like a basic cost. Maria, who's here, she gets paid by the hour as well, and she's our accountant. These are two people who get paid per services. They're not employees. They get 1099s and pay taxes, right? And so we have a couple grants right now that also have stipends. And so this is one of our tricky points too, because we part of our mission is to build capacity in our community and to really build up our Latino leaders and create a pathway for leadership. And sometimes there's barriers to being a leader if we assume everyone has lots of time. Like I probably put in 15 to 20 hours a week, right? And that's not possible for everyone. And it's also not going to be sustainable when I step away to assume that there's anybody who can spend 15 to 20 hours a week doing basically the role of an executive director of Colectiva, right? So why we're here is to dream about how we can use this grant model to work smarter, not harder, and to build a sustainable, what do you call that? Grant cycle, Mario? A grant cycle or just a funding model so that Colectiva can be sustainable and not burn out the people who care about Colectiva, but it can nurture all of us and nurture our community. So we had a retreat this summer, and when we did this retreat, we actually made a work plan and we looked at each one of our grants and we looked at our board organizational model and thought about who's going to do what by when. And so we have 5 representatives on our board. And the idea with the representatives is that they're in governance and like management, like volunteer management. And so, and we have an executive team that's me, Jose, who's Allison, and Nicole, who's our volunteer treasurer. And Amy, who's a team with Jose, right? And so one proposal that we talked about in the summer that hasn't really been realized is that for big grants like the Partnership Engagement Fund, each one of us on the executive team would take a piece of the puzzle, because the idea is that our schools are getting more getting to make more decisions these days than maybe in the past. In the past, Colectiva was just all about TAs, our teaching assistants. We're like, we're going to do a fundraiser and we're going to split up the money and everyone gets a TA is our goal, right? And now clearly we've started doing other things and schools have also started caring about other things. And so we can apply a one-size-fits-all model to know what every school wants. But we do have a representative from every school and they know what every school wants more than I do. And so we want those people to lead us. And we also want Molly to do less and less. And so this is kind of the model of how our executive team could be grant oversight people And then we also have leaders, a leader from each school, and these are the people who are actually doing the work. They're very much in a doing/management. So right now we're kind of splitting, like everyone's doing a little bit of management, but some people are aspiring to be more governance, and the leaders are firmly in doing and then managing volunteers to do more. And so the leaders for each school are based on our organizational priorities. So Elena is the leader of celebrations. She's here tonight. And she wasn't at the retreat, so we didn't fill in her box, but she just led us in an amazing Dia de los Muertos event that she and Gloria, who's also here, and Priscilla organized and managed pretty independently from the board. And Allison and me are the upline to celebrations. Okay. And then we have defensa or abogacía, or like advocacy. And Marta and Darwin, even though they don't come to meetings very often, they have a good connection with Jose, and he keeps that connection strong. And these are the things that we thought would be priorities for our advocacy arm. Because of the meeting connection, that's been a little bit, everyone's kind of dipping their toe into advocacy, but academics is another one of our branches, and then financial transparency. So even though Nicole's our treasurer and Maria's our paid accountant, there is a leader for finances who is in transition. I'm super happy to see Rodrigo here, because we're hoping that Rodrigo can fill in as a pinch hitter for Luz, who's been occupied. And then we have TAs, which used to be our full mission, but we've kind of moved away from that. And right now, Alan is managing the whole TA program pretty independently from everything. Teaching assistants. So I think that's my 15-minute introduction. I would love to open it up to Mario's reactions, all of your reactions, questions, and make this more kind of conversational around all these different events I've shown you. I'm happy to drop all the links in the chat.
Well, my initial reaction is wow, because it's great to have all this stuff there. You know, what I'm seeing is that you're at a phase where, as you're describing, Molly, your board is doing a level of management and governance, and then you have some folks that are doing some of the work or are directly involved in the carrying out of the work. And to shift to have your board to do more governance, then you need the systems, the people, and in essence, the training in place so that others can carry out that management and doing work, and your board can focus more on some of the governance and strategy pieces. And what that can look like is, when you're talking fund development, right now you're focused on the grants and what you've submitted. When you're talking governance and strategy, you're thinking about, is this mix of revenue that we have, is that the best mix to keep us moving forward, to help us accomplish the things we want to accomplish, to keep us sustainable into the next few years, right? That's kind of a big question you can look at. And then asking yourself, if you need to do something different, what are some options to do it differently, right? Do you want an individual donor component to your revenue? Would you like to see other contracting be a part of the revenue? So you get into this place where you're thinking about the mission and financial sustainability of your work, and thinking about how to do that while other people are getting the responsibility of doing the detailed pieces of applying for grants and doing the management and the carrying out of the work. So I think when you're at an early stage, it's all the same people kind of figuring out how to do it all together. And as you get some level of development as an organization, you can start to specialize and have specific roles that people carry. So I like the way you have in that grid different people that are responsible for different activities that you do, and those connections back to the full board, because you're starting to create some of those specialized areas and unique responsibilities. So one of the things that board members do as they move from that doing role to a more governance role is, like, you're leveraging your relationships to bring people in to help with the doing, right? Because you're kind of replacing yourself with some other people that you're bringing in. And, it kind of shifts at times from doing the work and managing it to helping secure resources for it, secure partnerships for it, and making sure the work is being done in the right way. But then other folks are carrying that out. So I think that's a natural progression, and I see some of the tools and things that you need in place to be able to make that shift. I think what's important for you all is to.
See- I see Brisa has a question. Is it
Oh,
okay to
yes,
pause for a second?
yes.
Okay, Brisa?
Sí, mencionaron que hay grants que primero se tiene que gastar el dinero y luego ellos pueden recibir el reembolso. ¿Tienen fondos generales para esto?
So Aida is in the English channel, we're not. Yes, Maria can tell you more about the details, but sometimes we get a monthly report that looks like it's negative because in that month we have like deudas, like we have things that we owe. But we do have a fund balance so that we're never spending more than we have. And the way that we get that fund balance is from things like right now, we're doing Give to the Max. And that goes into our pot and it's waiting for teachers to say, we have this we're doing Give to the Max for teacher grants, but maybe the money comes in November and the teachers don't ask for it until March. So we kind of take out a loan to pay for the grant activities and then get reimbursed and then give the money to the teachers, right? So fundraisers like Give to the Max help us maintain that healthy balance. Good question. Maria's the expert on that though, but I know
Yeah,
enough to know that we're not in debt.
no, that's good. And there's different types of grants. The grants that people normally think about are foundation grants where you get a large contribution or a large donation up front. And then you have to use that for a specific project or a specific program, or sometimes they're general operating dollars, which means you can allocate those dollars anywhere you want. So those are the ones that are desired because they're the most flexible for you to use. When it comes to,
And the Graves Foundation, 30,000, they gave us that up front. And they actually thought it was ridiculous that we have so many they thought, why are people doing this to small nonprofits doing the reimbursable thing? So they're a partner that we want to keep because they give us the best kind of money. And I don't even have to write reports. I meet with them. Jose and Aida met with me last time with them. They brought us out coffee. They treated us to coffee. It was really nice. And we just talked about what we're doing. So go ahead, Maria.
yeah, I was just going to ask, one of the important conversations to have is, what it looks like to transition from a more hands-on board to a more governance board. And just because it is different and people have different strengths in different areas. So it's good to talk about it because it's not always going to feel like a positive change for everybody. So if you're doing right now, if your board members are doing a lot of the direct work with folks, being a more governance board actually pulls you away from that direct work. So some folks don't like that. They would rather be like in the middle of the activities, in the middle of the programming. And there's ways to, in essence, try to find where people can play roles, even though the nature of your board is changing. So it's important to like be proactive in discussing that and not just kind of slide into it, because sliding into it, either way, there's going to be a level of like tension. But I feel like sliding into it, there's more tension to then kind of resolve it than if you're being more proactive up front.
Yeah. Allison? Oh, Jose has a real hand. Allison y después Jose.
Which one? Me first? Okay. I kind of want to talk about what happened before we had grants, because I'm looking at a bunch of people who are really new. And right before we started getting grants, the whole organization was based off of going around fundraising, whether it was chocolate sales or whether it was door to door, and we kept asking our community for money. And one of the things in the last 2 to 3 years that was really important was that we stopped asking our community for money and that we went out as a group and we asked other people for money so that it wasn't asking our own people. And so I think it's really important as we have these conversations. I know that at first Molly and Stina and Becky were just reaching for any money they could get that wasn't from our people. But then it seems like it's gotten more intentional, and that as we're growing, it's trying to be with purpose to grow the institution, the organization. And so I just want to make sure that we remember, like, I love being in a parking lot asking people for money, but at the same time, not everybody does, and it's not going to make as much money as going to the Graves Foundation. So I want to make sure that we have some institutional background in order to know, as you talk about growing and being uncomfortable, remembering that being in a parking lot is also uncomfortable. So.
Eh, gracias. Justamente mi conversación o comentario iba en ese tipo de transición. Así como Mario dice que nosotros debemos, ¿verdad?, diferenciar entre el papel de gobernanza y el papel de acción, ¿verdad? Está ese detalle de dónde venimos y hacia dónde, a dónde estamos y hacia dónde vamos. Entonces, en este proceso de transición, tenemos la dificultad de perdernos. Uno, porque no le gustan las nuevas ideas, porque es demasiado dinero, o estar haciendo el proceso de adquisición de tanto dinero junto, etcétera, etcétera. Pero otro es, como has dicho, Alison, que le gusta estar haciendo el trabajo en la comunidad. Entonces, tenemos que ver vamos a decirlo así, el estilo de organización anterior que teníamos al nuevo estilo que tenemos y la realidad de lo que somos en personas sumamente ocupadas solamente por un amor grande al servicio comunitario. ¿Y qué es este proceso, como ha dicho Mario, cómo se concretiza en la acción de cada uno? Porque algo concreto que puedo decir en esta transición es que muchos se enamoraron del proyecto y dijeron, sí, me gustaría participar, pero en la hora de la realidad fue insostenible que ellos se mantengan activos con las 200,000 cosas que tienen en su vida particular, más esta. Entonces, ¿cómo hacer posible esa transición, Mario, cuando tenemos personas que solo tienen el deseo grande, pero no la oportunidad en tiempo para dedicarlo a esto?
Yeah, so in estas, in these changes, often what we see is you see like a little extra effort to get all the right people in the right places. So let's say you want to keep that in-person solicitation, right? Those chocolate sales. Those can have a strategic purpose, right? Like you're meeting people one-on-one, you're doing the one-on-one conversations about the mission, about how people can get involved. So there's some value to that. How much time you want to commit to that compared to grant solicitation or grant applications, right? You may want to figure out what's the right balance for us. So I talk with folks who they want to do individual donations, but they're getting better results financially from writing grants. And the individual donations piece is more the quote unquote fundraising aspect of their work, where it gives them a chance to make friends and have people get to know the organization. And that helps create like this connection to community and maintain it, while the majority of their fundraising efforts are grants. So it's possible to find roles for both. It's just a matter of like how much, right? So the the thing that happens sometimes is because there is a shift in this example to larger institutional fundraising through grants at foundations or institutional contracts with schools or counties. That tends to take up a lot of effort, and a lot of energy. So figuring out what else can you do that gives people an opportunity to do that one-on-one type of work uh, is a question of priorities and a question of time that you can commit, and to a certain extent, a question of who are the right people to do those activities, right? Because not everyone's going to want to do the grant writing. They don't feel they have the knowledge of how to approach foundations, or don't feel well equipped to do the case making within the grant applications. And it's going to take time and some uncomfortableness to, potentially get them to play that role. So you'll see who are some of those folks who could potentially play that role versus others who could play other roles in the organization.
I know that Elena and Gloria are here and were a big part of last year's investment in people and Latino leadership pathways. And I'm curious to hear from you two about the impact of getting a stipend as like a super volunteer in and how that drove you to the board and how you feel now that you're on the board at a higher level of leadership and being asked to do things that aren't always on the ground, and that balancing. I'm just wondering from Elena and Gloria, if you could speak to your experience over the past 2 years. Oh, and Priscilla's here too. Another great example. Hola, Priscilla. Priscilla, if you can hear me, make sure you go to the, bueno, si me escuchas, estoy en el canal de inglés y puedes cambiar al canal de español donde encuentras a Aida. ¿Todo bien? So what we're talking about now
Sí,
is
buenas noches.
just, buenas noches. ¿Estás escuchando a Aida?
Sí,
Okay, good. So my question for especially Elena, Gloria, and you, Priscilla, is that over the past 2 years, you've been a big part, and Jose also was part of the Green Team, right? Allison was talking about how initially we got whatever grants we could get, and with all of the environmental grants, our first grant that we got was environmental or climate justice and racial equity. And so essentially we used climate justice as the vehicle for racial equity. And we gave a large amount of money to stipend teachers and parents who were taking leadership roles above and beyond what we would normally expect from a board member or even a PTO leader. They did initiatives that were large scale and met very often, did a lot of work, and were compensated with like up to $1,000 for a year, right? And I think that financial incentive was a big part about what helped them see themselves as leaders and kind of rise above being a volunteer and saying, I am a leader. I have this position, and now they're on our board. But I would rather Elena, Gloria, and Priscilla speak to their own experience about like what is the role of giving stipends or money in a volunteer organization when our big goal is to develop leadership and develop sustainable leadership.
Bueno, buenas noches. Me presento una vez más. Yo soy Priscila Quinde. Soy mamá de la escuela Las Estrellas. Y pues yo puse un poquito ya como de antelación en la última reunión del board, donde dije que no se trata de un pago. Hay que entender lo que no es un pago, porque si bien es cierto, son muchísimas horas, a veces son muchos días, muchas responsabilidades que uno asume. De cierta manera lo asume voluntariamente, pero también a veces hay que pensar el transporte o si tienes un carro, la gasolina. En mi caso yo me dirijo en bus, entonces son $2.50 veces, $2 de vuelta. Entonces son gastos que a veces no lo tomamos en cuenta. Am, y estas subvenciones es como un apoyo para poder de pronto desvincular estos pequeños gastos que se pueden presentar en el proceso, ¿no? Yo lo he visto así. En un principio yo no fui voluntaria esperando un pago, tengo que ser honesta, pero después hubo la oportunidad de estas subvenciones y obviamente que te alivie, ya no estás pensando en cómo hacerlo para poder dirigirte o, por ejemplo, yo cuido el jardín de las estrellas todo el verano, junio, julio, agosto, septiembre. Entonces fueron 4 meses en donde yo iba 1 hora, hora y media, pasando un día o 2 días, dependiendo el clima, en donde no solamente es ir a regar, es también desherbar, cosechar, llevar los instrumentos, sacar la manguera, guardar la manguera. O sea, son muchas actividades. Quise desvincularme y también ofrecí el apoyo a más familias, pero lamentablemente muchas familias o no lo quieren hacer o no lo pueden hacer. Eso ya no, uno no tiene el control de eso. Entonces, esa es mi experiencia en cuanto a que no se trata de un pago. Se trata como Molly lo ha puesto y nos lo han dado como un bono, como algo como, yo lo he visto como una gratificación a algo que tú estás haciendo, a veces, muchas veces fuera de lo que te correspondería hacer. Entonces, esa es mi apreciación como madre. Pues ya el board tiene que también tomar la decisión y mirar si esto es funcional, no es funcional, qué se debe mejorar. Pero yo pienso que sí es una gran oportunidad de que si existen esas subvenciones, ¿por qué no apoyar también a las familias de la misma manera que hacemos con nuestros maestros? Entonces, y los resultados están ahí. Los resultados están ahí, los jardines. Nosotros tuvimos que ir a traer toda la tierra y todo el abono de quien nos hizo la donación. Nos donaron eso, pero nosotros tuvimos que ir a traer, descargar, plantar, sembrar, a poner el compost, o sea, y llevaron muchísimo. Ese día estuvimos desde las 7 de la mañana, que fue nuestra hora de recogida, hasta las 4:30 de la tarde. Entonces, son horas que a veces uno dice, no se da cuenta, pero sí, es mucho trabajo, es bastante esfuerzo que uno logra hacer. Igual en la academia colectiva, el preparar, el estar pendiente de las diapositivas, que en mi caso que fui facilitador, o sea, son muchos factores que intervienen ahí. Y eso, pues, como digo, no es un pago, pero es como tal vez un incentivo, llamarlo así, no sé cómo lo vean otras personas, ¿no? Esa es mi apreciación. Espero que si algo se me olvida, sepan disculpar. Yo estoy nueva en este proceso, para mí todo esto es nuevo, pero ya vengo siendo voluntaria como 6 años, desde que mi hijo está en kinder y pues es el primer año que yo recibo un tipo de bonificación, puede decirse, por algo, pero son muchísimas horas, que a veces hasta inclusive si uno se pone a tomar en cuenta el hecho de coordinar incluso, así sea por WhatsApp, está llevándote tiempo hacerlo. Entonces, y el estar al tanto, estar al pendiente de los correos electrónicos, como en el caso de nosotros, que teníamos que estar al pendiente de cuándo nos iban a entregar el compost, cuándo la tierra, que a qué hora nos íbamos a... Todo es un proceso, entonces no es solamente decir, o en una sola reunión se finiquita todo y ahí se quedó y ya luego desvinculamos responsabilidades. No, es un proceso de días, de horas, de meses de trabajo.
Gloria, you were there too. Thank you,
Sí,
Priscila.
con frío, con hambre, con todo, ahí con lluvia, porque estaba lloviendo ese día de la tierra, pero logramos el objetivo, que era traer las cosas. Bueno, me presento. Gloria Velázquez, buenas noches a todos. En mi experiencia, pues fue muy bonito porque me dio la oportunidad de desarrollar mi liderazgo, que aparte de que ya había tenido en otras ocasiones servir así, fue muy bonito hacerlo en la escuela. Y también soy abuela y mamá de 2 pequeños en Emerson. Y sí fue, para mí fue gratificante el bono, pero como ya mencionó la compañera, para mí era mucho tiempo y con las manos ocupadas de los niños en, en el final se me hizo difícil por pérdidas que yo tuve en mi familia. Entonces, eso me hizo sentirme un poco débil y pues tal vez hasta desanimada para seguir en el programa porque no tenía ese ánimo de seguir, de echarle, no de quedarme pues quieta, pero sí como que me sentía triste, vaya. Pero eso no me paró. Ahora sigo pensando que fue muy bonito la experiencia de compartir, porque todavía los niños me preguntan, ¿cuándo va a regresar, maestra? Entonces, eso no tiene pago, porque el que todos, no un niño ni dos, sino que muchos niños, niñas, ay, me gustaría que fuera mi mamá. Oh, se siente tan bonito porque ah, dices, la apreciación de un niño quiere decir que hiciste bien tu trabajo. Entonces, eso vale más que tal vez el bono que me dieron. Entonces, eso es muy bonito. Pero sí, mi tiempo se hizo corto y algo pasó, pero bueno, ahorita estoy mejor, me siento mejor y necesito seguir participando. Esa es mi experiencia hasta hoy. Gracias.
Thank you. So I guess just with that, like a lot of things happen behind the scenes, right? And so part of what I'm thinking when I write grants and when I hear about experiences like this, I compare this investment in ourselves with what was our purpose, the TAs, right? And I think, wow, if you think about return on investment, I know this is like not a nonprofit term, or maybe it is, but but when you think about investing in Gloria, investing in Priscilla versus investing in a TA who comes for 10 months and then leaves, like this is something that was a forced change from our model because so many of our TAs last year got rejected at the embassy. So we're like, we got to spend these grant funds that were for TAs. Let's spend them on parents. I don't know. And then it turned out to be this beautiful iteration of the path, right? And so just like this election, right? Moments like this make us think about like, how does our mission need to change and adapt to respond to our community and to like the happy accidents that happen along the way. And so right now we have grants that we have not moved on because we have a much bigger board. You saw the org chart. I'll give you a little visual here. Oops, where is it? I dropped it in the chat, but we have this big board and it all came on June 8th of this year, and getting 20 people to make decisions has been challenging. We mostly use consensus, Mario, but right now there's some discomfort with really understanding our bylaws. Like on June 8th, we gave everyone a copy of our bylaws, and we understand we have to have a conflict of interest policy. And as board members, usually we're not paid. And, you know, Elena and Priscilla and Gloria, our board, well, there's a mixture of leaders and representatives, but none of them are on the executive board. So part of our like growing has to also say like, we have an opportunity to maybe redefine our bylaws and also think about if stipends where we're reimbursing expenses that are barriers to participation is different than being a paid or like gaining financial benefit, right, from being involved. And doing things like Gloria and Priscilla are describing are beyond governance, which is the role of a board member. And so how can we be okay and make sure that we're legally and financially doing the right thing when we have, I can give you a visual here of like, right now we have a line item that I would love to give to Gloria and Priscilla and Elena, which is school. You see this one here? 5 to 10 school liaisons to the community and Colectiva. So these are people who form part of the board and connect with a community liaison and lead a Colectiva working group or initiative as a leader would. And it's $10,000, but that breaks down into 5 schools, $2,000 per school. And it could be split between 1 person or 2 people per school, right? So it could be 5 to 10 people. And we bought computers because a lot of these people that we had in mind didn't have computers when they joined the board, but we didn't take that from this stipend. We bought that with our general funds from Graves. But we're trying to figure out how can we be legally responsible and also support the continued development of these 5 to 10 people who are really going above and beyond and straddling the doing, the managing, and the governing all at once, and really keeping us afloat in terms of their commitment to our mission through these grants.
And Molly, what I recall is when we were at that training in October, you shared an image of like different groups of people that are a part of the organization and I think referred to as the organizational chart.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is where thinking about your structure comes into place, right? I've worked so here's one thing I would encourage you to avoid, which I feel you have to a large extent, is avoid falling into that sort of traditional normal type of board, which is you have, let's say, 11 board members, you have 4 officers, you might have some committees that work and that report to the board. I've seen other folks use slightly different structures to accomplish their work. So they might have, a board that's relatively small, and they'll call it an executive council, they'll call it something else. And then they have kind of a larger advisory or volunteer body, and the roles can shift depending on how they're grouped in committee work, for example. And that just helps you navigate some of those items that you're describing, right? Like you have board members that you typically don't pay board members for board service, but you can pay board members for doing work. It can sometimes look a little muddy under just the ethics piece of separating the interests of the organization from separating your own interest. And that's where sometimes those structures of like separating the governing piece from, say, an advisory board or a kind of a working activity group creates some of that separation. So you have ways to maneuver your structure, and maybe you've already thought about that, and that's why you have the arrangement that you have. I just don't want y'all to feel like you need to converge into what is mainstream nonprofit world, because I don't think you're a mainstream mission. So the uniqueness should give you some thought, or should compel you to give some thought of like, what's the right structure for our unique mission and our unique way of wanting to accomplish the mission of involving community members, of involving families, involving schools, so that you can meet some of those other objectives, such as being more consensus driven, such as giving folks opportunities to come in, work, learn, govern, and there's different places for them to be a part of the organization. So my only advice right now is don't converge into the traditional sort of thing. which makes it difficult because then you have to think, so, well, what does this look like for us, right, to accomplish these other things we're trying to accomplish. So just know that there are a good amount of organizations that are in that quote unquote non-traditional form of doing their work that come up with different ways of organizing their board and their volunteers.
Thank you. So what you're saying is one way of making sure that with the payment part would just be to make sure that their job description for how they're earning a stipend is not normal board responsibilities.
Correct, because it's the part of carrying out the work, which is not, it's separate from that governing part. And you mentioned like conflict of interest. That's a great way of in the disclosure part of conflict of interest to, in essence, let people know that you're somebody that might be considered for these sorts of roles, and that's why you're connected to the organization. Membership organizations navigate that, right? Because they're trying to give a preference to their members to get contracts or get awards to do the work or to be vendors. So when folks are in those sorts of boards, they're disclosing that, I might be up for, XYZ type of opportunity. And that just lets people know like we're on the up and up. And folks then have the part where they recuse themselves from the conversation as part of the conflict of interest management. But you quote unquote give it the sunshine, and then you create that separation of their involvement in the decision making, and you can learn to navigate that.
Okay. Do any of you have questions about this? I'm looking and see it's 8:20. So we have Mario for 10 more minutes tonight, and at some point we should look and see when our next monthly meeting will be. I think we're going to skip December and go to January.
Puedo agregar una pregunta al respecto, Mario. Con respecto a lo que tú acabas de decir, y es la parte difícil que Colectiva tiene en cuanto como los directivos somos lo mismo que hacemos y al mismo tiempo, si se quiere decir, lo mismo que estamos haciendo y armando todo el aparataje de lo que es Colectiva, entonces sí se puede ver como un conflicto de interés si uno vamos a decir, se autodona en ese tipo de comisión, ¿verdad? ¿Eso es lo que tú dijiste para entender bien?
You can do it, you just have to manage it, right? So
Okay.
in a conflict of interest piece, you want to let people know that you're eligible for this sort of benefit. So when I worked at a different place, our members were businesses, and they bid on services and other things that we did. So those board members who were also entrepreneurs needed to let people know that I'm going to be a part of the bid at some point. And their responsibility was to step away from the decision-making part when it came to that item. And that's one way to create, in essence, kind of a separation between folks being able to say, yes, I want to apply for this activity or receive a benefit from this activity, but they're not involved in the decision making. That's one level of separation. Another level of separation is to just not let people who are within the org apply for those things. So there's degrees. It's not either or. There's degrees of how permeable those barriers are. They can be really, really strict, or they can be a little bit loose to let things flow, but then you just have to be able to navigate them.
Would a proper description of the activities that could be allowed for members to perform to make things happen could be identified, and that perhaps can help, if member A or member B and member C, they already have the governance, but they also help in performing XYZ, therefore they're allowed to get a stipend for those activities. Would that help a little bit identify, or I guess justify the
Yep.
payment for members for that might be
Yeah.
an option.
You could do it at the beginning of the year. as you're looking at your work plan for the year. Just in essence, disclose that these board members have the network, have the experience, have the skills to do this work, and they might be eligible to get compensated for this work that is complementary to their role as a board member. So you can disclose it early on. Everybody kind of just puts it on the table that this might happen, and everybody knows that this is a potential thing. And then when you get to the time of making the decision, then you navigate that differently. But you can do that up front at the beginning of the year.
Thank you.
Great questions. Maybe one more question for Mario or two? Especially from people who are not on the board. I'm so happy that you are here. What are the questions that you have? We try to be very transparent with everything we do, but maybe there are bigger, more basic questions. Don't be afraid to ask.
Hi, I have a quick question. Just to clarify, so do you need to have the conflict of interest? Does that need to be written into the bylaws? And then how are you like documenting that process?
It does not need to be written into the bylaws, but it can be a separate board policy. So you just have your 1-page, 2-page conflict of interest document that talks about how you approach it, and then gives a place for folks to disclose any potential conflict of interest. And basically they sign off saying, I understand my responsibilities. So there are stuff like that that complements your bylaws without further making them bigger.
To be in there? Okay.
Yep.
That makes sense. Thank you.
And that happens when people receive their written copy. They're like, oh, I might be applying for this role, but it's not written into the bylaws. It's just when they receive the copy as a board member, they write along with their signature, like I'm recluse. What do you call that? I'm
disclosing.
disclosing. I'm disclosing that I'm gonna apply for a stipended role. Okay. We could do that with the new year, 2025.
Yeah, I think that'd be wise to help set the tone for, preventing any conflict of interest as mentioned.
Yeah, and I would say for the folks who are newer to board service, two things to keep in mind. A lot of foundations or charitable giving types of organizations that review nonprofits want you to have this. So it's not just particularly to you. And it can just help create some clearness to avoid any any bad stories about what you're doing. Again, I was a part of a membership organization, and we gave a preference to our members for certain things, and we were very clear with folks that that's one of the benefits of being a member, is that there's a preference. It's not just us trying to pat the backs of our friends. There is a mission element to it, and that just helps combat any anything folks might want to say about, oh, they're just trying to help themselves and support themselves. No, like, you have people that are committed to this and they're playing certain roles, and something like a conflict of interest form just gives clarity on how those relationships are being managed.
Well, we have completely abandoned like the membership definition of like a PTA, like we don't charge dues or anything, and that would be very against our mission. You could say that everyone who is a parent, a teacher, a stakeholder of our 5 schools is a member. And yeah, we actually are collecting businesses, like who has a business in our community, because we like to buy food for our teachers from those businesses. We prefer to have our mamas, like Elena last night, make the food for our community meetings, right? As opposed to paying a restaurant. And so I guess that could be conflict of interest too, because they're vendors. And so that should all, as long as we think about all that and address it, we can just say we are giving preference to our members, and that is part of our mission. I think I've had to submit the conflict of interest policy for one grant before. Priscilla?
Sí, yo solamente quería compartir que en el caso cuando, bueno, yo no quise ser partícipe de justamente por eso, para evitar el conflicto de intereses, porque siempre que voy a algún lado me dice, ¿usted trabaja aquí en la escuela? ¿Usted trabaja aquí? ¿Usted? Porque estoy como mucho tiempo en la escuela o estoy mucho tiempo en grupos, siendo voluntaria, apoyando en los salones. Entonces, como que me han hecho partícipe de que ya formo parte de la escuela. Y cuando Molly me comentó lo que iba a suceder con acción climática, le dije, Molly, no, prefiero trabajarlo como lo he venido haciendo. Hicimos lo que nos proponen, pusimos la propuesta en todas las páginas de la Escuela de las Estrellas, en todas, en donde los padres podrían aplicar. O sea, entonces, desde ahí se parte que no fue un conflicto de intereses, que no fue algo que se quisiera solamente hacer en un grupo fijo, pero al ver que no hubo un mes como que estuvo ahí eso rotando, girando y nadie se inscribía ni nadie lo hacía, pues Molly tuvo que tomar la decisión. O sea, hay que ser honestos. Es como dice, o sea, sabes de tus capacidades o del interés que le pones. Entonces, pues uno opta por entrar en este vínculo de subvenciones, que yo la verdad al principio no sabía ni qué significaba. Entonces también eso, o sea, que no se ha hecho por debajo de la mesa, eso quiero dejar muy claro. Desde mi experiencia, todo fue claro, todo fue expuesto a las familias, para las familias, ya que estos presupuestos eran enfocados a las familias. Pero si las familias no llenaron o no lo hicieron, había un tiempo tope también en donde tenía que ese puesto ejecutarse. Es lo mismo que pasa en nuestras reuniones de board, que si algunos miembros no asisten, pero hay que tomar decisiones. Entonces, ahí también tenemos que hablar como equipo, que aparte de formar parte de un equipo, sea PTO, sea junta de padres, de lo que sea, tiene que haber una responsabilidad de parte nuestra. Y es lo que le dije a Molly, cuando asumimos un rol es siempre importante tener como detalles de qué estamos asumiendo nosotros, cuáles son nuestras responsabilidades y ya más allá de lo que nosotros podamos hacer, eso ya queda como a responsabilidad nuestra. Pero sí hay que asumir con responsabilidad un rol. En mi caso, el ser representantes es tratar de mediar entre la comunicación de colectiva y las estrellas y para mí ha sido algo desafiante, pero no imposible y se está logrando, se está pudiendo tener esa conexión con la principal, con otros miembros de la escuela para poder conllevar las cosas que suceden con colectiva. Entonces, yo sí quiero dejar claro eso porque no ha sido algo que ha sido oculto. Si revisan en el WhatsApp, ahí están todo lo que se ha publicado, todo lo que se solicita a los padres que se unan, que sean facilitadores, que pueden ayudar para lo que era el cuidado de jardines y todo lo demás, pero si es que no hay un plan también que hay que cubrir. Entonces, pues hay que darle la oportunidad a las personas que sí quieren hacerlo, que están dispuestos a hacerlo. Y como dijo Gloria, más de esa bonificación o ese incentivo es todo ese cariño que uno luego recibe, en especial de los niños, en especial de a veces del mismo personal de la escuela, que te reciben con gratificación de un saludo o decirte que eres bienvenida a la escuela porque sabes el interés, las ganas que le pones a lo que estás haciendo. Entonces, eso también es muy valioso y hay que tomarlo en cuenta. Y como experiencia cuando recibimos a nuevas personas, es importante dejarles saber qué es lo que se espera de ellos y qué ellos esperan también de nosotros, porque pasó que en el caso de acción colectiva se unieron algunos padres, pero pensaban que era como solamente estar ahí un ratito, pero cuando se dieron cuenta que era más tiempo, más trabajo, más horas, más esfuerzo, se hicieron para atrás y dejaron puestos vacíos. Entonces, también esa es como experiencia, como para nosotros ir pensando como equipo, cómo hacer que esto sea funcional para todas las partes.
Yes. I don't know, Mario, if you would like to close and as we pick a date for our next meeting. Any other response?
Yeah, I would just say I think there's places where I feel I can be helpful on how to create the piece around governance and strategy, which I feel is where I can come in. I feel like you all have a lot of the pieces around carrying out the work and managing the work, which is fantastic. So I'll just keep like focusing there myself. And as I'm learning more about the organization, it just gives me more context on how to refine any advice I would provide.
Yes, and very, very soon we're going to have a new website that tells our story a lot better. That was also a paid gig that one of our communications, where is this tab? Okay, anyway, on the org chart, it was Valentin made our website. Yeah, but it will be launching soon and it will better tell our story. So while we're all here, I know that making decisions on camera is hard, but it's better than any other form that we have. I will change, when I scheduled this repeating event, it just went to the 19th of every month. We know that Mario prefers Tuesdays if we're going to meet at night and we're all here. So would picking a Tuesday in January, skipping December, like the 7th of January work for people? Let me say the 7th because the 14th is a board meeting. I don't know if our advocacy team is going to be out at the board at 7:30 that night. Or the 21st, which is right after MLK Day. Do you want to put your preference between these 3 Tuesdays in the chat? 7th.
The 7th will be the second day after coming back from Ray.
That rough. That's rough, huh? Okay. 21st. Day after. Okay, Colin says day after MLK. That's a long weekend. It'll feel like a Monday. Okay, so I think all of you are on this event. So if I do this, you should get a notification. Does anyone need to be added to this event? Oh, wait, that's just the Zoom event. Okay. I will add all of you. If you know of somebody else who wants to join, I think it's important that we kind of keep a collective knowledge, but we will, if it's okay with all of you and Mario, we could put this on our YouTube channel so that anyone could catch up and still be part of this group. Yeah. We have a YouTube channel, y'all. We also have a Give to the Max campaign going on. Give to the Max is Thursday. So be an ambassador. I was talking to Aida, who shared our Give to the Max campaign with all of her interpreter friends. Be an ambassador and repost our Give to the Max campaign to all your friends and your social media and however you communicate with your people. Thanks, everyone. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Adiós, que duerman bien.
Sí, buenas noches. Thank you for coming.
Bye.
Bye. Sí.
Molly, dejas de grabar, por favor.
Sí, sí, claro. Ok. Pause. Espérate. Stop. Stop share. And stop record. Stop record.
Tengo chisme,
Okay.
tengo chisme.
Ave María.